June 26, 1944. Hollandia Air Base, Dutch New Guinea. The humid air clung to the men like a second skin as ground crews moved briskly between rows of B-24 Liberators, their aluminum skins glinting beneath the early morning sun. Engines coughed to life one by one, sending ripples of dust and fuel fumes through the heavy air. This was the 22nd Bomb Group, veterans of countless missions across the Southwest Pacific, gearing up for another long-range strike against Japanese oil facilities in Borneo. Each man knew the risks. Each knew the long stretch of sky between here and home. But the war would not wait. The mission that morning was precise. Targets were deep inland, beyond the enemy's defensive perimeter, oil installations feeding Japan's desperate war machine. The 22nd would lead the way, their Liberators laden with 500-pound bombs, fuel tanks brimming for a 1,000-mile round trip. In the ready room, the men listened as briefing officers outlined the plan. Headings, altitudes, enemy positions. Their faces were calm, almost routine, but the quiet glances told another story. Every man understood what long-range mission meant out here. It meant hours over open ocean, no margin for error, and the constant threat of fighters or flak waiting ahead. Outside, the jungle shimmered in the morning haze. The roar of engines built into a rolling thunder as the first formation taxied to the strip. "Time to go," someone muttered. Within moments, the sky was filled with silver shadows, the Liberators lifting gracefully one after another into the blue. The long arc of the mission began. At altitude, the formation tightened. The coastline fell away behind them as they crossed the vast, empty waters of the Arafura Sea. Inside the bombers, sweat glistened on faces despite the chill that crept through the thin fuselage at 10,000 feet. Gunners scanned the horizon. Navigators checked and rechecked their charts. Radios crackled faintly with terse exchanges. The hum of engines became a kind of rhythm, steady, hypnotic, relentless. For hours they flew. Beneath them lay nothing but ocean, a shimmering mirror broken only by clouds and the occasional shadow of another aircraft. Then, as land appeared on the distant horizon, the crews stiffened. Borneo. Enemy territory. Somewhere ahead, Japanese guns waited. The lead navigator confirmed the course, and the formation angled inland toward the smoke-belching industrial sprawl near Balikpapan, the heart of Japan's oil empire in the Dutch East Indies. As the bombers approached, the first bursts of flak rose to meet them, black puffs spreading like ink blots across the sky. The intercoms came alive with clipped voices. "Flak 2 o'clock high. Hold formation. Steady, boys." The Liberators pressed on. The sky became a cauldron of shrapnel and thunder, each explosion shaking the planes to their rivets. Yet the pilots held course, flying straight and level into the inferno. The bomb bays opened. The bombardiers called out their final checks. Bombs away. A tremor rippled through each aircraft as the payloads fell. Strings of dark shapes tumbling earthward, vanishing into smoke and fire. Seconds later, columns of flame erupted from the target area, licking upward as the refineries burned. "Good hits," someone shouted over the radio. "Oil tanks burning." It was a victory, but a costly one still unfolding. As the formation turned for home, Japanese anti-aircraft batteries redoubled their fire. Shells burst perilously close. One B-24 took a direct hit on its right wing, the explosion shredding metal and flame trailing behind. The radio crackled. "Number 3 engine gone, losing altitude." The crew fought desperately to keep her flying. They jettisoned equipment, sealed fuel lines, anything to keep the fire contained. But the stricken bomber began to drift behind the formation, its fate uncertain. Below, the jungle canopy stretched endlessly. There would be no soft landing here. The pilot made the only choice left: ditch near the coast. The men braced. Impact. A plume of spray and smoke marked where she went down. The formation flew on, heavy with the knowledge that some friends would not return. It was the price of war, one they had all come to understand too well. Hours later, the survivors of the mission limped back toward Hollandia. Fuel gauges dipped dangerously low. Some planes had been holed by flak, engines coughing from damage. Yet, as the coastline of New Guinea reappeared, the tension eased slightly. Home, at least for now. The runways shimmered in the afternoon heat as the liberators touched down one by one, their tires screeching on the tarmac. Ground crews rushed forward. The smell of fuel, oil, and burnt metal filled the air. Debriefings followed. Maps were marked, damage assessed, losses tallied. The men of the 22nd Bomb Group gathered in the dim glow of the operations hut, listening as intelligence officers confirmed the success of the strike. The refineries were burning. Japan's oil supply had taken another hit. But for those who didn't make it back, no victory could fill the void. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, the base fell into a heavy quiet. Mechanics worked through the night, patching bullet holes, replacing engines, readying the liberators for the next mission. In the mess hall, tired men ate in silence, their faces streaked with oil and dust. Tomorrow, there would be another target, another flight, another sky filled with flak. This was the life of the airmen in the Pacific. Endless miles of ocean, long missions into the unknown, and the constant whisper of danger just beyond the horizon. Each day was measured in takeoffs and landings, in bombs dropped and friends lost. Yet they pressed on, because the war demanded it, because duty left no room for hesitation. And so the 22nd Bomb Group continued its relentless campaign, striking deep into enemy territory, crippling the supply lines that fueled Japan's war effort. Each mission brought them closer to victory, but also deeper into the heart of danger. By the summer of 1944, the tide of the Pacific War had begun to turn. The Allies were advancing across the map, island by island, base by base. But for the men at Hollandia, the war was still far from over. Their courage, endurance, and sacrifice would pave the way for every step that followed. June 26, 1944 was just one day, one mission among hundreds, but it stood as a testament to what those airmen gave and what they endured. The sound of engines fading into the dusk carried with it the weight of history, the echo of men who fought the longest battles not for glory, but for peace. And as night fell over Dutch New Guinea, the sky that had once thundered with warplanes grew still again, a fragile silence that the world would remember long after the guns went quiet. The silence that descended over Hollandia that night did not last long. By dawn, the low hum of engines filled the humid air once more. For the men of the 22nd Bomb Group, rest was a luxury rarely afforded. The Pacific War was a machine that demanded constant motion, always forward, always deeper into enemy territory. New orders arrived before the first coffee was finished. The next mission was already in planning. Another long-range strike, this time aimed at airfields and shipping lanes that supplied Japan's grip over the Dutch East Indies. The liberators were inspected, patched, and refueled. Each aircraft bore its own scars from previous missions, holes stitched over with dull aluminum, soot-streaked panels, worn nose art that told stories of survival and loss. Crews moved methodically, checking fuel lines, arming bombs, calibrating guns. There was no bravado here, only quiet determination. The 22nd had seen too much to mistake courage for noise. They were veterans now, tempered by 2 relentless years of war, stretching back to the early desperate days in Port Moresby. Back then, the Japanese had seemed unstoppable. From Rabaul to Leh, their reach extended across the Pacific like a storm. But through endurance, through countless missions flown over jungle and sea, the tide had shifted. Now it was the Allies who pressed forward, their bombers stretching the limits of endurance to cut the arteries that fed Japan's empire. Each drop of fuel burned in those engines carried a piece of that momentum, inch by inch, island by island. In July 1944, the 22nd Bomb Group began its move westward. The war was advancing toward the Philippines, and with it came the need to bring the heavy bombers closer to the fight. The men packed their kits, loaded supplies, and left behind the familiar airfields of New Guinea. Their new base would be in the Palau Islands, closer to the front, closer to danger. The move itself was an operation. Crews ferried aircraft across vast stretches of ocean, escorted by fighters when available, navigating through storms and headwinds that tested both machine and man. They landed on airstrips still rough from recent battles, surrounded by wreckage of earlier campaigns, burned-out Japanese planes, cratered runways, the scent of cordite still lingering in the air. But even amid the destruction, there was progress. The Allies were building forward bases faster than the enemy could destroy them. From these new outposts, the liberators of the 22nd Bomb Group struck hard and often. Their missions ranged across the South China Sea, hammering enemy convoys, oil tankers, and airfields from Borneo to the Philippines. Each raid cut deeper into Japan's ability to sustain its war effort. The men could see it in their targets, the once busy harbors growing emptier, the fires burning longer, the smoke rising higher. The empire was bleeding, but it refused to die quietly. Every mission came with a cost. Flak was heavier now, more accurate. Japanese fighters, though fewer, still attacked with ferocity. In the thin air at bombing altitude, liberators were easy marks if they strayed too far from formation. Crews learned to rely on each other completely. Each turret, each gunner, each pilot, part of a fragile web of survival. And when a bomber went down, the loss echoed across the squadron like a wound no one could see. One mission over Borneo stands out. A formation from the 22nd ran into intense anti-aircraft fire near Miri. The sky filled with black bursts, fragments tearing through aluminum and flesh alike. Lieutenant Harold Kessler's aircraft took a hit to the nose section. His bombardier was wounded, controls damaged, but somehow they managed to stay aloft. Over the intercom, Kessler's calm voice guided his crew through the chaos. "Hold tight, boys, we're going home." Hours later, trailing smoke, they limped back to base. Landing on 2 engines, the fuselage riddled with holes. The crew emerged, exhausted, shaking, but alive. It was another miracle among many, and yet another name to be painted on the group's growing list of heroes. By late 1944, the focus shifted north, the Philippines. General MacArthur's promise to return was being fulfilled, and the 22nd Bomb Group would help pave the way. From Palau, and later from newly captured bases on Leyte and Mindoro, they joined the relentless assault on Japanese positions across Luzon and South China Sea. Their targets grew larger, convoys fleeing from Manila Bay, refineries in Formosa, and airfields where the rising sun insignia still gleamed defiantly. It was here, amid the Philippine campaign, that the 22nd earned a new name among the troops, the Red Raiders. Their nose art, once whimsical, now bore fierce crimson emblems of vengeance. The war had changed them. The faces that had once been boyish were now hardened by fatigue, loss, and experience. But through it all, the same determination burned, to finish the job, to bring the war to an end, to make sure every sacrifice meant something. The missions grew longer, the targets more distant. Sometimes the liberators flew 12 hours round trip, pushing fuel reserves to the limit. There was no room for error, no second chances if an engine failed or weather closed in.
Yet mission after mission, they pressed on. Over the crackling radios, code names and coordinates passed like lifelines. Each successful strike brought the Allies one step closer to Japan itself. By early 1945, the 22nd Bomb Group had moved again, this time to Clark Field in Luzon, a base carved from the wreckage of what had once been an American stronghold before 1942. Now reclaimed, it pulsed with new life. Rows of liberators stood wingtip to wingtip, engines rumbling, their presence a symbol that the war had turned full circle. The men who had once been forced to retreat from the Philippines now stood ready to finish what had begun 3 long years earlier. The air raids intensified as Japan's defenses weakened. The 22nd joined massive bombing formations targeting the home islands, striking shipping routes and industrial centers. But the cost was mounting. Losses came not only from enemy fire, but from exhaustion, mechanical failure, and the relentless grind of combat. Some crews simply vanished over the sea, lost to storms, engine failure, or navigation errors. Their names were listed as missing in action, but among their comrades, the meaning was clear. Still they flew. Day after day, through heat, storms, and gunfire, the Red Raiders carried the war to Japan's doorstep. In the final months, as the atomic age dawned and the war neared the close, the men of the 22nd Bomb Group looked back on the road they had traveled, from the jungles of New Guinea to the skies above the Philippines. Each mile had been paid for in courage, fuel, and blood. When Japan finally surrendered in August 1945, the news reached Clark Field over the radio. For a long moment, there was silence in the operations hut. No cheers, no shouts, just a deep exhale that seemed to release years of tension. The war was over. The engines could rest. The men who survived would soon go home, carrying with them the memories of skies filled with smoke, the faces of those who hadn't returned, and the sound of bomb bay doors opening over enemy soil. The 22nd Bomb Group had flown thousands of missions across the Pacific. They had struck the heart of Japan's empire and helped end one of history's darkest chapters. Yet for those who lived it, victory was bittersweet. The cost had been immense, but through their endurance and sacrifice, they had written their names into the great story of freedom. One mission, one flight, one long and unforgiving sky. As the last B-24s stood silent on the tarmac, their wings streaked with oil and time, the Pacific wind carried the faint echo of their journey. It was the sound of duty fulfilled, of courage tested, of men who gave everything so that peace might one day return. And though the jungles reclaimed the old airfields and the names of their planes faded from the fuselage, the legacy of the 22nd Bomb Group, the Red Raiders, endured, not only in records, but in the eternal memory of those who still remember the thunder of their wings.
And so, the skies that once roared with the fury of war have grown quiet planet, leaving behind stories of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless spirit of those who fought for freedom. The men of the 22nd Bomb Group, the Red Raiders, remind us that history is not just dates and battles, but the lives, choices, and bravery of those who lived it. If their story moved you, if it brought history to life in a way that words alone cannot, I invite you to join us on this journey through the past. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell so that you never miss a story that honors the heroes of World War II. Every view, every like, and every subscription helps keep their memories alive and brings more of their incredible journeys to you. Thank you for watching, and may we always remember the skies they soared, the battles they fought, and the freedom they helped secure.